is volume 7, me and Joe. So we're very excited today. We're going to talk a little bit about some cybersecurity, maybe some of the things I learned, and Joe can help me out there.
Good to talk to everyone again. It's been a little while. Larry's been actually hitting the books pretty hard, so we'll catch up with him on how his studies have been going and everything as well. And Larry, I'm super excited to talk to you about any kind of questions you have.
So my first question is that I've been really thinking about is why is Linux the operating system that is like the choice for hackers or the
Yeah.
choice for where they build viruses and stuff?
I think that's an amazing question because, especially when you're first learning computers, you have a lot of options. We were just talking about this right before this call, right? You've got Windows, you've got Mac, and you've got Linux. And there's a few other exotic things out there that a lot of people don't use, in day to day. Like there's, IBM has a mainframe that some companies still use. But for a home
Yeah.
machine, basically you have those choices, right? And I think a couple of it comes down to if you think internationally, the whole world does not have the wealth and the money that we have here. So a $200 piece of Windows, that could be someone's entire month, earnings in another country. Linux is free. There's no cost for Linux. So I think that is a big reason why Linux is a choice for international hackers, because when you're first getting into hacking, if you're coming from, if you don't have a couple $100 to buy a copy of Windows, just getting that copy of Linux is going to help. So that could be potentially one reason for it. I think another reason for it is that Linux actually has a computer compiler built into it. So you could write some code and then you could actually make it
Yeah.
into an executable right from the command line. It could actually compile the C programming language right into it. You can't really do that with Windows unless you actually, buy a compiler. So
Right.
I think it lends itself to computer programming. And in order for a hacker to, like a good hacker, I'm talking like a really, really good hacker, in order for them to actually write malware, write a virus, create an exploit shellcode. You're oftentimes going to have to know a programming language in order to build that. Now, for the rest, that's like the top 1% hacker. That's like a really good, they write their own, program. They're probably going to be doing that on Linux. The rest of us, the 99% of us that don't program, what we do is we basically go and we download the programs that those guys have written, and if you're a blue team member, you download those codes so you can actually see if your defenses can defend against it. If you're a red team member or penetration team, you're going to be using those programs that someone else wrote in order to attack some systems. So again, there's there's what's true for the 1%, like the people that are actually writing the hacking programs, and then there's what's true for the 99% of us that aren't writing it, and we're just downloading, viruses or malware that other people wrote, right? So I think
Right.
just having that language built into Linux has a big advantage. Now, there's a third reason I think, Larry, which is Linux by definition is going to be more secure than Windows for a lot of reasons. When you run Linux, you're typically not running as a root super user out of the box. You're typically running as a non-privileged user. In most people's
Right.
homes, they're actually running as a full local admin. And an admin can do anything. They can modify
Oh,
the
okay.
registry. They can create programs on the C drive. They can do all that kind of stuff. In Linux, when you're not running as root, you basically have access to your home directory, and that's about it. I mean, you
Oh,
you
okay.
can't you can't damage the operating system if you're not running as the root super user. On a Windows machine,
Oh, okay.
most everybody runs with the highest possible privilege all the time. So when they make one mistake, they go to the wrong website, they open the wrong email, they make one mistake, and their computer's basically owned at that point. That's not true with Linux. With Linux, you could open the wrong attachment, you can go to the wrong website, and the most that can happen is that virus is probably just going to run under the context of your user account, but it's not going to damage the underlying operating system unless it's a what's called a 0 day. A 0 day is basically,
Yeah.
it's a virus that basically targets a previously unpatched vulnerability in the operating system, and generally speaking, Windows has more of those, many more of those than Linux or even Mac. Mac is actually built on top of Linux. It actually is called Apple OS X, which is actually a flavor of Linux. So really,
Right.
fundamentally, there's only really two. It's Windows or Linux. Mac just happens to be a version of Linux called Mac OS X, right?
Right.
Hackers, when they want to run on a secure system, they're going to run on Linux, because they don't want people hacking into them. So they have more control. They have a feeling of safety and security, knowing that they're running like a hardened version of an operating system. And they're just as paranoid as anybody, because they know how easy it is to hack Windows. So they don't want to be like building their house on a shaky system, right? So in the mindset of a hacker, they know other people are probably trying to get into their machine. So they're going to probably be running a pretty hardened version of Linux. Now, and they're going to have a version of Windows, because they're going to want to have something that they can start testing their code against. So every decent hacker is going to have Windows, but they're usually having it in order to target, and sure, they'll use it when they need to run Windows programs and stuff, right? And then you've heard of virtualization software like Oracle has, I think it's called, I'm flaking on the name. It's a virtualization software kind of similar to VMware, and it'll actually allows you to run Linux inside of Windows, or you can run Windows inside of Linux. You can basically run operating systems inside of operating systems, so that you don't have to have two different machines. And so there's basically free virtualization, software that you can purchase to do that, so that you don't have to buy more than one physical computer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Let me see if I can look up the name of
We
that.
learned about something called a sandbox, and I know you know what that is.
Yeah.
So do you practice that
Yeah, I
a
do.
lot? Like,
I do. So sandboxing, from a defensive standpoint, it's important to take like I got an email from someone claiming to be a lawyer the other day, right? And I didn't know them.
yeah,
So they sent me a PDF, and it was basically a subpoena, right? So do I open this PDF? Does it contain a virus? Does it have a 0-day in it? Do I really want to run that on my system? No, I wasn't expecting the email. I don't know who they are. PDFs are known to contain viruses. So that's when I use a sandbox. I open up the PDF in a sandbox, and I see, is it trying to harm the registry, the C drive? Is it trying to make a remote call to an outside IP address? Is it trying to launch an executable or a script? What is this PDF actually doing? Because I wasn't expecting it from that person, and I don't know if it's safe or not. So we use sandboxing when we're concerned about something like that, because that's the number one way. 90% of hacking comes from an email attachment or a website that you go to that actually has hacking code in the website that then takes over because of maybe a vulnerability in the web browser like Chrome, Firefox, Safari. So you got to keep your web browsers patched all the time, like all the time.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so as you see, I am learning a little bit, because we were told before especially if you're working with a client or something, and if you suspect something, you should always you put it in the sandbox first before you mess up everything in their computer.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
And
So
test it out.
yeah, like have a separate, computer that you don't care about, and you open it up over there, and that way there's really no danger of you messing up the system where all your photos are. Because you think about this, a lot of people, they'll have a ton of pictures, that are on a computer, but it's not backed up anywhere. Well, if that computer gets ransomware, how much are all those photos worth to you? I mean, those could be permanently lost forever if they weren't backed up, right? And so you gotta protect the most important data that you have, which is a home user. It's probably going to be your photos. There's not much more, because you can never replace those, right? Those are memories and everything. So, yeah, I keep my photos in the cloud so that no matter what happens on any of my machines, those are safe. But
Yeah,
then
safe in the cloud.
you
Yeah,
got to
yeah,
protect your cloud account with a second factor of you can't just have one password. You have to have it send a code to your phone as a second factor, because that one password, if you're using that same password on other websites and then those other websites get hacked, then they can get into your iCloud. We talked about that on, I think, episode 1 or 2.
yeah, yeah. We did. So what we're also learning is, and this is just for the regular households, that so your internet provider, so your internet, and it sends out a radio signal. Sometimes people can have that up so high. So if I'm walking past there, if I'm just driving in a truck past their car,
Yeah.
and then it'll just pop up on my like on my phone
Yeah.
or on your computer or something, and
Yeah.
that can be a way that they start hacking in.
That's right. So basically, the FCC defined wireless home networks to only have about a 300-foot range. And for every physical wall that you put in between yourself and that wireless access point, that actually
Yeah,
shrinks the range that it can go. So if you have like 4 walls, it might not go the full 300 feet. But if someone's got one single wall and they have their access point and you're driving by, you're going to be able to get on their network if you know the password, right? Now, if they don't have a password on it, then they're basically inviting any passerby to have free internet access, right? There's
right.
you've heard of Edward Snowden.
Yeah,
So in his book that he wrote, he said that when he was trying to basically send all the secret information that he found, he took his laptop and he drove around, basically finding access points that were not secured, and that's how he was transmitting the data that he basically stole from the NSA. He basically would drive around, jump on a hotel hotspot or whatever, transmit it, and then he'd keep driving, because then if they traced it, they'd trace it to a hotel, not his house.
right.
You know.
Oh, that's smart. So, so my third question is it dangerous? So, if you go like to Starbucks or to a hotel and
Yeah.
you use their internet, because most some
Yeah.
of them do have, uh, they can have
That's right.
a password, but I don't think that password changes. It
Yeah.
might be the same password for a while.
So
And
it is dangerous, because if a hacker basically takes over that router, you know, then all your internet traffic is going to pass through that router. And you were learning about HTTP versus HTTPS, right? Well, if
right,
you're going to a non-secure website, HTTP, and a hacker took over that router, they're basically going to have your passwords. They're going to have any data that you transmitted. So yes, that's a
right,
problem. There's 2 ways to sort of solve that. Number one, only use websites that have the HTTPS. That's one option. There's a browser extension that you can add to your browser that actually forces all websites to use HTTPS. That's another good option. I think it's called like HTTPS Anywhere. It's like a browser extension you could
right,
add to your web browser. And then the third option is use VPN. So if you put a VPN on your laptop and you connect to someone's Wi-Fi, then all your traffic is totally encrypted. Even if a hacker took over that Wi-Fi access point, they won't be able to read any of your data, because it's like a tunnel. All your stuff is going through this encrypted tunnel, and the hackers can't look inside of it because the packet itself is encrypted and is protected. So, those are a couple of things you could do to protect yourself when you do join a Wi-Fi access point. The other option is just don't join the Wi-Fi and just use your 4G, connection. You
yeah,
clearly don't want to use 5G, because that's how you get COVID, right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I think 5G is because of COVID, and I do believe
It's pretty funny.
Oh my god, that's very funny. Oh my god. No, so this is all the things that we're learning now in school. Just the things that you're that you're letting me know now,
Right.
those are the things that we're starting to learn. And I know it's kind of like still baby stages of things,
Sure. Sure.
but
You got to start somewhere,
yeah,
right? Yeah, you got to
yeah, we
start
got to start
somewhere. Yep.
working. And I'm starting to understand those things. And I didn't know. Well, I did, I knew, but I didn't really understand when you're walking like and you like a bunch of people's just internet providers come up like my neighbor's house and this neighbor's house and this neighbor's house. And if I was a hacker, I would just ride around and find one that's unsecure and then
Yeah.
just get up into their network.
Absolutely, and that's why it's important to have a good password on your Wi-Fi router. But even
Yeah.
if you have a good password on your Wi-Fi router, did you know that hackers can still get in even if you have a good password? Basically, there's a lot of hack. So we talked about Kali Linux, right?
Hmm.
So Kali Linux is a version of Linux that's preloaded with tons of hacking tools on it, tons, and
Oh
some
wow.
of them are Wi-Fi hacking programs that allow you to basically what they do, Larry, is they'll listen to all the wireless traffic. So you'll be like hearing your neighbor's traffic, you'll be hearing your traffic, and it's recording
Oh,
all the traffic, right? And then when it looks at the key, the SSID, like the WPA2 encryption key, it stores
right.
it, and then it can actually start guessing passwords against it and just hammering it. It's called brute force, right? So if a
Right.
hacker listens to your WPA2 key and they install one of these cracking tools, they'll eventually be able to get your password with enough time if they want to. So
Yeah.
it's gonna happen if someone wanted to get in bad enough. So, some of my some people I know really suffer from some mental illness, like paranoid, super paranoid stuff. And I always have to remind them, look, the government isn't driving around your house trying to hack into your Wi-Fi, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
not. You're not if you're not like doing anything plotting it or whatever, you're not on the radar. They don't care. So you can't like let that keep you up at night knowing that someone can get in. You just have to do the best you can. And then what you have to do is build layers of defense. So you do the best password you can on your router. You got to keep that router firmware up to date, because if you don't keep upgrading your firmware, and if it's on an older version, then there's going to be programs out there that can hack in because you're running a vulnerable code. So keep your browser up to date, keep the operating system up to date, keep your Wi-Fi router up to date. So to get into your Wi-Fi router, you got to go to 192.168.0.1 is typically
Right.
the address of the router or something like that. You'll bring up the administration page, and then you'll go into the update section and you'll say check for updates. Or you go to the manufacturer's website and you go to the download section and you download the latest update. And you got to do that regularly. So right there we have a problem because most people don't do that, right?
No.
No one does that unless you're in IT and you know the risks. But
Yeah.
let's say even if you're in IT and you know the risks, how many guys are really doing that? Guys and gals are doing that regularly. They're just not. So
Yeah.
you just gotta know that the advantage will always be to the attacker, because all they have to do is just find out where your weak point is. You're either weak here or you're weak here or you're weak here. And so you gotta do what's called assume breach. You have to assume they're gonna get in. So what you have to do is take your most valuable information that you care about the most, and you got to make copies of it. So put a copy on a USB stick and keep it unplugged somewhere. Put a copy in the cloud, and then maybe a copy over here. So the best practice in government is to have 3 copies of your most valuable information, and have one cloud, one offline, one over here. And that's the best you can kind of do, because it's kind of inevitable that they're going to get in and get it
Yeah. If they want to.
if they want to, if you're a target.
Yeah.
Now, what's motivating these people? The money. If they can get ransomware on the machine, right now the average fee is about $700. And as an American, you could probably swing that. You know, you got a credit card. You know, most people can probably put that together, and they know that. They know you can, and so they're not going to make it a $50,000 thing because they know you're just not going to pay that. But they'll make it just enough where it hurts, but you still want those photos, right? And so most people pay the ransom because they need that data on their computer because they're not backing up. So that gets us to the fourth principle, backups. You know, keep the browser patched, keep the operating system patched, keep your Wi-Fi router patched, but you got to have a backup of that data because you know that ransomware is coming because these people in these other countries, they got to feed their families, so they're just choosing a life of crime to do it. You know, it's going to happen. You know.
Yeah, no. So I mean, the crazy thing is that what we learned in school, yeah, you could pay that, but it's not 100% you're gonna get back.
That's right. It's a 50-50
You're gonna
shot.
get it back.
It's a 50-50 shot.
50.
Because do you think these people basically have any kind of morality at all? If they take the money, or is there any guarantee that they're going to take the extra time and give you the encryption key to decrypt it?
No.
You know, the only thing that you have going for you is that if word got around that they would never give you the key, then no one's ever going to pay. So they have to basically keep the reputation high enough where word doesn't get around that they won't give you the data. So right now it's about a 50% chance, maybe a little bit higher than that. It depends on which crime group you're dealing with. There's crime groups in Russia, China, North Korea. There's crime groups here in the United States. There's crime groups everywhere. And so depending on which one you're dealing with, you might not get it back. The other problem is this. A lot of people don't know this, Larry, but if the size of the data file is over a gigabyte, then you can't get the data back because there's a problem with the ransomware and the decryption where the size of the file being too big, the decryption tool won't do it. And so people lose their data if the size of the file is too big. And that's happened. There's some public evidence that that's happened. Yeah.
Oh my God. Man, it's getting more, as you see, you use the words that I understand now.
Yeah. And you know, the most important thing more than anything is backup. Because if you have a backup, you don't need to pay the ransom. So let's say you didn't patch your router, you didn't patch the computer, you didn't do all those things we talked about, but you backed up your data, you don't got to pay the ransom. So that's really the most important thing than anything is backups.
Yeah, because then you can do a clean from your computer, wipe everything down, and then just plug everything.
That's
back
exactly
in.
right. Yeah, you can start over. Yep.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask, do you have your most important data backed up?
No, I don't. But I don't have a lot of pictures, so I have them mainly on my phone.
Right.
And actually, I'm gonna back up my wife's stuff tonight, Michelle's.
Good.
I'm gonna back up her stuff and all that stuff, like her important stuff. I'm gonna go and get her like one. You can buy one. They're very cheap. I think like $60 or something. That big buy.
You know those USB.
Yeah.
You know the USB sticks.
Yeah.
You can get them at Office Depot for less than $10 now, and it'll handle most of it, like 64 gig or 128 gig. We're talking $10 or $20 now for those USB sticks.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
But you got the what's the extra hard.
You can do those. You know, if you have a ton of data, absolutely, but. Those little sticks now, they hold so much data now. You can probably fit most of it on the 64 gig or 128 gig. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that for Michelle. Just back all her stuff up in.
Now, did you know, Larry, that there's such thing as ransomware for phones?
Yes, and I know it's coming out, and I don't think they use it as much yet, but I think
On Androids, it's a problem. It's not that big of a problem right now on iOS. but on Android,
Oh, okay.
it's a big problem on Android right now. You can if your
Oh,
photo
wow.
if your photos are on your Android, you can actually get ransomware on there and lose your photos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I better get a little USB for myself. I might be Office Depot. I will be seeing you soon
Yeah,
as be.
or you back it up to the cloud. That's probably easier because I think you can get free. You know the Google Photos.
Yeah.
I think you get like 25 gig, or you get a lot of photos on Google for free. So you could probably just take if you install the Google Photos on your Android, you can say back up to cloud, and it'll take your photos up there. And that's as long as you have two-factor authentication on your Google account, then you're all set.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. See, there you go. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that one. I didn't know that it was that advanced yet, but I had a
Absolutely.
feeling they're getting it.
So 2 years ago, I attended a conference in San Francisco called the RSA conference, and I attended a full 8 hour day on how people put ransomware on phones.
Wow.
We had experts from Homeland Security, FBI. There was speakers from McAfee, speakers from all over the world that came into that conference talking about this problem of ransomware on phones. Yeah,
Wow. That's crazy.
totally right.
Joe, it's getting crazy out here, but I mean, I'm learning so much. It's my head is exploding half the time. But it's still like it feels like I don't know anything, but I know a few things.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you know what I mean, I know
absolutely.
a few things. So and I'm glad because your how you explain everything, it made it a lot clearer.
Good, good. I'm glad to help, man. Glad to help.
Yeah, so that the light bulb is flickering, Joe. It's not all the way twisted in and on yet, but it's getting there.
Well, I appreciate it, man. Um, well, so what do we want to talk about next time? Do you think?
uh, I think next time we should talk about just um, how to really, for the most part, like you were saying, how should we secure how you should secure your phone and your home and
Mm, yeah,
and like with a client, what do you tell them? Hey, you guys need to make sure you have your backups together and
yeah,
stuff like this. Your updates, your IT people, make sure they're updating everything. And
yeah,
maybe I think people will be interested in hearing that because
absolutely.
we talked about you got your malware, you got your viruses, you got your worms, your Trojan horses, and we know how they get in,
Yeah.
and that's how a hacker gets into your computer. So we know how to get in, and it's hard to get them out when they're in there. But I mean, what do you do? Do you just do a whole clean wipe you back up? If if your backups together, you could wipe out everything and just reinstall everything. Is that the best thing to do all the time?
It's a good question. And I like the question because you're recognizing the fact that the computer you're using may already be hacked.
Yeah.
And a lot of people haven't come to that realization yet. And that realization, there's a name for it, is called assume breached. And
Right.
if you're assuming that you've already been breached, then you could actually take action. But if you live in a world of denial, assuming that everything's safe, then the hackers are going to maintain their status quo. They'll be in there and they'll do whatever they want. So, it's not practical for people to be wiping their machine all the time because time is valuable and people just aren't going to really do that. So I think if you just kind of know, we're going to, maybe talk next time about a threat model. The threat model
Right.
is knowing who your enemy is and what they want. And what they really want right now as a consumer is they want to put ransomware on your device because they think you haven't backed up, and most people don't back up. So as long as you're backing up, you can live relatively at peace knowing that, hey, if I got hacked, all my data's on the USB, or if it's in the cloud, and it can happen because you have to just know what's going to happen, right? So I think that's
Right.
probably my biggest advice to people, and we'll kind of get into that, is what is the threat model. Now, if you're operating a business and you have a credit card machine, they're going to want those credit cards, right? So
Right.
it's a different threat model. The different people are going to come in for different reasons. So you got to look at protecting those credit cards. You got to look at other stuff. If you're in healthcare and you operate like maybe a small like healthcare clinic or something, hackers are going to want those social security numbers because those actually get sold on the dark web for value. There's value
Right.
in those health records and stuff. So yeah, I think that'd be a good conversation for next time for sure. And what I'm hoping we can
And
do is, if you watch those videos I sent you, we could do some more lab exercises and get you some.
yes.
We got to get you more hands on, because
Yeah.
the talking is great. I love the conversation. The books, the tests, all this stuff's really really good. But Larry, you will make the most progress when you're doing the hands-on labs, and that'll separate you from the rest, especially when you go in for your interviews. And you basically, if you have 10 other people that are at your level and they have the same experience, everything, but you have a lab and you could show them what you did in the lab. As a manager, as a hiring manager, I'm going to hire you every time over everybody else because you demonstrated that you can do the stuff, as opposed to people that they didn't even take the time to build the lab. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
they didn't even show the interest that they sacrificed their own time at home, and they built it. That shows passion. It shows enthusiasm. So it's not only going to help in the interview, but there's nothing better for building skills, than the lab. So I think we should do more lab work.
Lab work will be the next. I got one more question before we leave,
Sure.
and I want to know if this is true or not. So we learned that to have good security, you have to have money in cybersecurity. So saying
Yeah.
for this is what we learned. This is what we learned. So you can have like Norton or something, and that's just a okay
Right.
security system.
Right.
But security systems cost money.
Yeah.
So they're saying it costs money. So the more money you spend, the better security you have.
There's some truth to that, Larry. I also learned something that I'll share with you that I learned when I was studying, which is never spend more on security than the value of the asset that you're trying to protect.
Okay.
So, what is the value to that business of protecting those records? Like, if they had to rebuild them from scratch, how long would it take them to do that? Have a cost in mind for that, and don't spend more on the security system than the value of that asset that you're trying to protect. So, yes, you do have to spend money, especially in a business. You just have to keep it proportional to the value of the asset that you're trying to protect. Always keep that in mind, because it wouldn't make sense to actually, I'll tell you the best analogy. You know how like when you move, you got to put stuff in storage because not everything fits in your house. I mean, that happens to all of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I moved from Texas to California, we had this like beautiful dining set, beautiful, like long table. It was gorgeous because you can get a big home in Texas, right? But when you come to California,
Yeah.
you got to downsize because you're it's not happening. So we were thinking, okay, let's put this thing in storage, and so it was going to be like 144 a month or whatever. And I did the math, and I figured out, okay, what did I pay for this table? And how long am I going to stay in this apartment? And if I stay in this apartment for more than 2 years, then that storage fee is going to cost more than that original table. So I made a decision now, even though I love the table, I have to sell it because I know I'm probably going to be an apartment dweller for a couple years. And so
Right.
the same principle should apply to security. You should go into it knowing, okay, I've got this asset that's worth $500,000 to protect. I'm not going to spend $1 million on a security system. I'm going to spend something proportional to the value of that data. It's like a life insurance policy. It's like any other kind of insurance policy. So I think if people look at, the dollar investment to protect in proportion to the value of getting hacked, I think that will help keep the budgets reasonable. And
Right.
if that's how I would kind of answer that question.
Okay. I got you on that one. I knew it because I was wondering that came up in the test and I got the answer right. I was just wondering what's like the general thought in a
Yeah,
definitely in the cybersecurity world, but
yeah.
I get it. I get it. Hey, guests, thank you guys.